create an EC2 instance. Okay, to T2 micro. I'll give it a name, DevOps VM, or we can also call this as a DevOps host. We will use our Ubuntu 22 EC2 instance. And it will let it be T2 micro. It will work. And choose our key pair. Okay, as of now we can allow port 80, but we'll have to allow some other ports as well. And let it be 30 GB of the disk, and click on launch instance. So this is the public IP. I'll connect to it using my key pairs. Okay, so we are connected to our EC2 instance. So first thing what we'll do is we'll just set a host name. Okay, let's set a host name. It's not mandatory, but let's set it. Set host name CTL. So I can check the host name. Okay, so let's log out and log in again so that the changes, you can see it on the screen. The changes are reflected. So the host name is set for this VM, devopsvm.example.com. Now let's start the installation. The installation is very easy. Sudo apt get update and sudo apt get -y install docker. Okay, just don't use docker, you should use docker io.io. So if you see the docker is installed, we can check which command will show where is the location of docker binary. Okay, and if you do sudo systemctl status docker. Okay, it shows that the docker is running. Okay, the docker engine is running. Okay, so status we have check, and most of the times we'll be using this command docker ps. Okay, so and it needs a sudo level privileges, so we'll do docker ps. Okay, and if you see, it's trying to access this socket. Okay, and it needs, as it is a where is a part of root level. Okay, so it is saying permission denied, but if you give it permission on this path, if you give ubuntu user, okay, permission, you can access it without sudo as well, but we'll be using sudo. We'll continue using sudo docker ps. So it will show the container ID, which image it is using, the command created, status, and all. Okay. So in short, a docker ps will show all the running containers. Okay. ps-a will show all the running and non-running containers. Okay. But we haven't created any container. That's why it is giving an empty response. But remember, the ps will give details of all running containers, and ps-a will give details of running and non-running containers both. So let's start with our first lab, that is 1.1. We'll run a simple web app nginx container using docker. So we have completed these steps. Okay, and when the containers are installed, okay, they are installed from some images, and we'll learn more about it soon. So docker images is one of the command which we'll also use. Okay, this will show what are the images available, as it is a fresh Linux system with docker installed. It doesn't have anything. We haven't created any container, so there is no image as well. Yeah, and if you are using a same VM, okay, which already has something installed on it, like Apache or Nginx, okay, we did some exercises, okay, but most of the times we are deleting the resources and creating it, so we won't have any port running. Okay, so this exercise will need port 80 and 8080. So using these commands, we can even check if they are in use, but we know that it's not in use. But remember, these are very useful commands. Both it will show which port is in use, okay, and which process is using. Okay, both by netstat and lsof we can see. Now let's run our first container. Okay, and the command is this one. So I'll just run this command. We can also give yeah, I've already given a name to it. So what we are doing here is docker run. Okay, docker run, it will create an application which or a container whose name would be, here I'm giving hyphen name web app. Okay, and the image which it will use to create this container is nginx. So the image name we always give at the end. This sequence may change, okay, but try to follow the same sequence. Okay, so this is the nginx image which will be used to create a container called web app. Okay, and if you see it here, I'm given -d option and -p option. Okay, so -d means run it in a detached mode. What is detached mode? I'll show. Then next I'm saying -p. Okay, -p means the port it is giving. Okay, so as I said earlier, on a single host, that is, this is the host, okay, VM or a DevOps VM. On a single host or a VM, we will be having multiple containers. Okay, and we know that nginx runs on port 80. Okay, so inside the container, it will always run on port 80. okay, but on a particular host, it needs to be running on some other port number. Okay, so we'll make it run on 8080. Then again, when we create one more container, okay, then it cannot have port number 8080. It will have some other port number. We'll give the port number 80. Okay, so this is important. The first part is the port of the host, that is this DevOps VM, and inside the container it's port 80. Okay, so how it looks inside the container, how it looks at the outside, we'll see that. Okay, but now let's remove this. Okay, I'll just remove it. I won't give port number. Okay, I'll remove it. I'll also remove -d, that is a detach option, and let's remove -name as well. Okay, so this will also run a container, but with some difference. Okay, so if you see what it is saying, unable to find image. Okay, we asked it to use to run a container which using the image nginx. Okay, so what it is saying, as we have not given the any version, we should give any version or a label to it. It took automatically the latest version. Okay, so it tried to find if under means using docker images, if the image nginx is already available, the latest version, and it sees that it is not there. Okay, so what it is doing, as it is not available locally, okay, it is pulling from library nginx. Okay, so here it is not directly mentioned, but by default it is downloading it from the internet from a website called Docker Hub. Okay, so if you see, it's actually docker hub.dockerhub.com, but we see we said it Docker Hub, hub.docker.com. Okay, so this is the centralized location where means the Docker itself, the Docker company is maintaining this. Okay, all the containers, most of the containers are available for free, okay, publicly on this site, and we can also create our own private that we'll be seeing next. Okay, so what we have done, we are running a nginx container. Okay, and what it is doing at the backend, it is first pulling the image, nginx latest image. Okay, means actually it is running two commands. First is docker pull and then docker run. First it will pull, it has completed pulling. Okay, after pulling that image, it is running it. Okay, it is running it, but if you see, the shell is utilized, it is consumed. We cannot run any other command on it. Okay, so I need to check again the status, and also what I'll have to do, I'll have to open new session. Okay, and check all those things. I'll do login in another shell. So if you see here, still it is in use, the shell is in use. Okay, so let's run the commands on the another terminal on the same server. So I'll do sudo docker ps. Okay, so if you see, the container is running, which is having a container id, and every container will have a unique id, container id, and it is using the nginx image. And remember, if it is not available locally, it will try to download it from internet, by default from Docker Hub. Okay, so there are some other docker images repositories as well, but as of now, remember, it is the Docker Hub. Okay, so inside the docker, something should be running. Okay, so inside the docker, some command is running. Okay, it was created 2 minutes ago, it is up from last 2 minutes, and inside the container it is running in port 80, on port 80. Okay, we know that nginx is a web server and it will run on port 80, and as we did not give any name to it. Okay, so I removed the hyphen name, so it randomly gave some name to it. Okay, and if I do docker ps-a, it will show both running and non-running. As of now we have only one. Okay, and again check with docker images, it will show a docker image. Okay, that is downloaded and it has some 188 MB size. And why it is saying 11 days ago, someone created this image and pushed it on Docker Hub 11 days ago. Most probably the Nginx company has done that. That's why it is showing 11 days ago. Okay, so this image is used to run the container. Now I want to access it. Okay, right? The container I need to access. Okay, so one of the method would be sudo docker execute. Okay, exec means execute -it, an interactive terminal. Okay, for the I can also directly give the image name, the container name or the container ID. Okay, I'll give it a container ID /bin bash. Okay, I'm trying to execute an interactive terminal for this container. Okay, and trying to access this bash shell. Okay, so now I'm inside the container. Okay, let's see if this command runs. Okay, it will have very small footprint or small size. Okay, so most of the commands will not run. Okay, so we are inside the container now, and let's try to run the command curl localhost. Okay, so if you see, it is giving the default Nginx page. Okay, so inside the container it is running properly on port 80. Okay, by default, due to the configuration of Nginx, it runs on port 80. Okay, so if you see inside this container, there are very limited processes are running. Okay, that due to this it is very lightweight. Okay, and very fast as well. On any other operating system, unnecessary will have to run many processes. Okay, and they may interfere with each other. But in container we have only specific things related to Nginx only, nothing else is there. So even the IP command or if config command, let's see if config is running. If config command is not there, we can install it inside the container using apt-get, all those commands. Depends. Okay, most of the times it may or may not be Ubuntu, it may be some other OS as well, so you can check that. Yeah, so it is Debian is also one of the Ubuntu flavors, so apt-get will work. Okay, so this is how we access the container. Okay, but every time we'll not be accessing the container by going inside the container. We need the access from the outside world as well. That is, it should run on the VM, and this VM is available to the outside people, at least on the internet, intranet, or on our private network. So if you see, this DevOps VM is having an IP address, this one, 172.31.29.28. That is the private subnet. Okay, of AWS. So we should make it available on this IP address so that anyone can access the container using this. Okay, so now what we will do, we'll just do Control C. So if you see, our terminal was in use. Okay, and we had to use some other terminal to access the details of the containers. Now if I do ps, okay, as I have stopped it, it will not show. Just do ps-a. Okay, so as I said, ps-a will give both running and non-running containers, and non-running is this one, and docker images. Okay, so we do not have ports for docker images and all. And the important difference is the image. Okay, it cannot be running. Okay, and the runnable image is called as a container. So most of the times interviewer may ask, what is the difference between docker container and docker image? Okay, the image we use to run the container, or you can say the runnable docker image is a container. So Now we need to modify it. Docker run command. So what we'll do, again we'll do docker run. Okay, now I'll use -d option. -d means detach. So this will not consume the terminal. It will run in a detached mode. Okay, detached detached means detached from the terminal. Okay, and I'll use port. So I want to access it from the outside world. So this is the host port. Host port means the DevOps VM port on which the container will be running. We are mapping it to port 80 inside the container. Let's give the name to container as well. I'll give it web app 1. Okay, and I'm using nginx image to run it. Okay, and look at the screen carefully. Just I'm entering. Okay, so it ran it fast. Okay, it did not download because the image is already downloaded, okay, in the earlier step, so it didn't take much time to run the container. Now again run those command docker ps. Okay, if you see, the container id is this. It also has a name. Okay, this is the name. And if you see, the ports are open. So this one means 0.0 means it is available on all the interfaces. Okay, so apart from this local host, okay, I can also access it from any VM in within this range, okay, of this IP range. I mean this IP range. Okay, on port 8080, and inside the container it's running on port 80. Earlier we have already seen how to go inside the container and check it. So I can again do that. So docker ps, to add sudo to it, exec. Okay, -it. This is also interview question. At least they are expecting docker exec. They'll ask you how you will enter inside the docker container. So command it docker exec -it. Let's get the docker container id, or we can also get the container name and do /bin bash, access it shell bash. Okay, so again, for sometimes we'll have to go inside the container to check if everything is working fine. Generally we'll use curl that the application is available inside the container. Now let's try to access it inside from the docker host itself. Curl localhost, as it is working on 0.0.0, that means that it is working on all the interfaces. So it will work on localhost as well as IP address. So on localhost it is running on port 8080. Just check the IP address of the DevOps VM. It is this one. And again do curl port 8080. Okay. So we do not have any other system which is in the same range. That is, no, we do not have any other EC2 instance with the GUI. Okay. Otherwise, if I access it from other system, it will also show it. Okay. So this is how we create the containers. Okay. Now let's run some more commands. So we have created the container. So which commands we have seen? Docker ps, it will show the running container. Add sudo to it. -a will show running and non-running containers both. And if we do images, it will show Docker images as well. And then we use the command docker exec. This command execute an interactive terminal for the particular Docker container ID and access its shell. Using it, we can go inside the container and run some commands. Okay, then we can also use sudo docker logs. Okay, for the particular container ID. Okay, so it is giving some logs of that particular container, docker logs command. Now I want to stop the container. That also I can do sudo docker ps. Okay, it is running. Just use sudo docker stop container id, or even application name also you can use. Using container id, it is stopped. So if you see in the docker ps, we cannot see it. Okay, so before removing, it is also always a good practice to stop it and remove. Sometimes we may remove it directly. So ps-a will show both running and non-running containers. Okay, so one of the container was earlier, now we ran this one. Now just docker rm will remove the container. So I'm just doing the cleanup, okay, so that it doesn't interfere with the next exercise. I'll just do docker rm. It is a stop container only, we can remove it. Then again remove the other container as well. So docker ps-a will give both running and non-running containers. So if you see it again now, docker ps-a, nothing is there even in docker ps, but we still have the docker image. If you want to delete, we can delete docker image as well. So for removing a container, the command is rm, and for removing an image, it is rmi. I stands for image, rmi, and the image id, not the container id. So that's why using docker images get the image id and remove it. Now let's check docker images. Nothing is there. Docker ps, nothing is there. ps-a, nothing is there. Okay, so this is the most of the commands we have covered.